Beloved friends, it's always a good reminder that when we are in worship, I might be the only one that has the title of reverend, but we are all in ministry. You will see now they're scrambling like busy, wonderful ants are moving around, moving into new positions. You almost think that this is a double play and all the players are moving into position to do the next thing. I mean, how many of you would agree that their role was just to play that special music and be done? No. There is always the next thing, the next preparation, getting into the next position. And that's really the message today. So I'm telling you what I'm about to tell you, and then I will remind you of what I just said in hope that you will remember what I said so that you put it into practice. As a beloved church, we believe that we reflect and reveal the unselfish love of Christ in all that we do. Not in what we did, but to reflect and reveal the unselfish love of Christ in all that we do. And so that is the lesson today. Amen. That's not the sermon, that's just the intro of it all. This week is especially busy for ministers for more reasons that you can imagine. For example, this week I have been busy arguing theology with my fellow pastors. We talked about what is the best approach for the text, and many of us will start talking about deep theological atonement cases and the argument of different atonements. If you're new to our church, I would like to address you to the cross over there on the left by the Psalm 46 that says, "Be still and know that you're God." Now move to your eyes to the cross and you will see some elements of theology. Right on top, you will see Luther, then Calvin, and then Knox. And to be quite honest, they are deep theologians and they will never like to be put in that order. They will be arguing who comes first and who goes last and so forth. But anyway, Luther and Calvin have something called the punitive argument of substitution. And we were arguing about that. That's a big fancy word. And today, rather than teaching you a deep theological thing, I'm going to help you color with crayons and for you to see the practice of it all. Because of those conversations, I had some thinking to do in my family. And I began with my mother, whom I love dearly. Her name is Gina. And Gina is always on to me like a good coach. Now, if you were to ask me, what is the greatest thing that my mother ever did for me? Some might argue that she gave birth to me. And you might say that is the greatest thing that my mother ever accomplished. And I will say that you are wrong. You are wrong. Because my mother continues to have influence in my life. At 42, my mother continues to be of benefit to my life. That's okay. That's a good problem to have right there. But then if you talk to my father, you will say, well, what is the greatest thing that my father ever accomplished? Now, I'm looking at this as a father myself. You know, on September 16 and June 1st, you know what I did? Hey, honey, are you comfortable? Remember to breathe. Do you want an ice chip? Can I go get it? No? Do you need anything? Or let me sit down in this couch right here that is very uncomfortable. Have I told you how uncomfortable this couch is right here? And let me pull my Switch or my iPhone or my iPad or my computer and just watch a movie while you bring life into this world. What have I done for my children? If mothers give birth, what have I done? Nothing, really. Would you agree with that? I love it. Somebody say yes. I've been thinking about it, and we were having this conversation, me and my father. And my father started to reminiscing about his failures in life. My father isn't a minister. He was a committed ruling elder in the 7th Presbyterian Church in Colombia. And most Saturdays, my father will force me and my brother to go to this little village outside of the city called El Porfin. The name of the town is in Spanish. Here's the translation. We're finally here. That's the name of the town. It was filled at that moment with displaced people because of the civil war that was going on in Colombia, because of the guerrillas and the paramilitary and the FARCs. And so people will escape the more rural parts of the country and move into the city seeking protection. And obviously, they encounter poverty, violence, abuse of alcohol, and other recreational drugs, and even what you might call sexual violence. And so my father will take us there to do ministry. He will encounter young people, and he will try to really care for them. And he was telling me that this was his greatest failure because nothing came out of it. No church, no development, and including some of the children that were now adults that he cared for lost their life to drugs or violence. And I was in the position to remind my father that his success wasn't measured onto that, but measured, for example, onto me. Papi, those were formative years in life for me, where I learned how to be stubborn. Now, I know some people might use the word stubbornness as a bad thing, but stubbornness is not all bad when you analyze that stubbornness for the right things. For example, fighting for justice or preaching the good gospel. Jesus was stubborn in many ways, in the right kinds of ways. And so I was telling him, and when I was telling him, my father's eyes were filled with tears because he had never considered that the great testimony and the great accomplishments was not just them, but it was also how he dragged me every single Saturday. And I told him many, many times, I hate you. You don't know what you're doing. You're ruining my life. Has anybody heard those words before? All of this to say, I want you to think about Jesus. Just like I was thinking about my mother and thinking about my father and thinking about my friends. What is the greatest thing that Jesus ever did for us? Some might say, well, Christ died for us. And you might agree that that is the greatest thing that Jesus ever accomplished. And I will stand on the other side and it says, here's something to consider. What is more important? That Jesus was born or that Jesus died? Because one cannot happen without the other. And logic dictates that if one cannot happen without the other, the first one is more important. My friends were like, what? No, that can't be. The greatest thing that Jesus ever accomplished was to die for us. And I said, really? I want you to consider in this scenario, how many of the disciples were present at Jesus' death on the cross? And if that is the most significant thing that Jesus ever accomplished, are you telling me that disciples ever missed it? Wow, that's a pretty big thing to miss. Wouldn't you agree? Is my mother's greatest achievement that she gave birth to me, or how she continues to encourage me and continues to tell me how much she loves me? Is the greatest foundation of our faith, is that something that Jesus did on the past or what he continues to do today? I want to read more of the story today. I want us to go to page 90. That's Luke 24. And I'm going to read the first 6 verses. Luke 24, beginning of verse 1. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified, and rightly so. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He's not here, but has risen." Here's the best part, the very best part. Remember how, not what, but how. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee. This is a word inspired by God for us, the children of God. Thanks be to God. In a moment of terrifying nature, Jesus' message continued to say, remember how he told you. It is significant for us to consider the elements of the story. Earlier, Mel did a reading about the good thief and the bad thief, and one is pushing the other. And one of them recognizes the saving grace, and the other one didn't. We are often in that left and right position. Can you recognize what Christ did? Or can you recognize what Christ is doing? And that is the question for you today. Can you recognize what Christ did only as in the past? Or do you believe in a living, rising Lord that continues to do good and excellent things in your life today, despite all of the challenges, despite the imperfections, despite the brokenness, despite the sickness? Can you recognize what Christ continues to do on your life today, right now, not something of the past? Or are you going to be the Father says, I gave birth to you, bow down, worship me, because that is the best thing I did 42 years ago. Bow to me, worship me, give me everything I want, because I gave birth to you long, long time ago. Or receiving the benefit of continue to enjoy that company. Today is a very special day in my life because I know that my brother, Omar, is with my mom, Gina, and my father, Omar, in worship today. See, 20 years ago, I abandoned my mother. That's really what I did. I'm being dramatic, I know. But I left to go to seminary. My brother left following his wife. He lives in North Carolina. I live now in the great state of Florida. How many of you are happy to live in Florida? I am. Sunshine, and even a bad day doesn't last forever. Yay! But we both abandoned our mother. That's what I did. At the end of this, I'm also thinking about my grandma Josie. And I want to live in the way that she did. On her bedside, she requested that she wanted to talk to me. And with her last couple hours of life, she decided that she was going to call the people that matter and she was going to be in a position to bless them. So the last memory that I have of my grandma, and my grandma was very Catholic, she gave me her blessing. Now, she said no words. At the time of her death, she was blind. She couldn't hear very well. She didn't have her dentures, so her lips, and I don't know if you know what happens to someone without dentures, what happens to their face. She was not a shadow of the woman of strength that I remember. But boy, her faith was soaring like eagles, like Isaiah 41 says. When I think about that, my faith blossomed, because that is what I want to accomplish when I die. I have already decided what I'm going to do for my retirement plan. Yeah. When I retire, whenever that is, meaning whenever I stop getting paid, basically, I'm going to find this little church, I'm going to find this young pastor, and I'm going to say, hey, I want to help you. I know a thing or two about preaching and teaching. I would like to do it in this little thing. And my plan for retirement is to go to preach when the pastor needs a vacation time or teach a Bible study. And at my bedside, I want to call my families and my great-grandchildren, if I'm lucky to see them, and give them my blessing. Because what matters is not what I have done in the past, is what I continue to do in the future now. Because if we are going to be risen people, resurrection people, it's not about the thing that we did in the past. It's about what we continue to do today and how that propels us forward. The message of the gospel isn't simply theology. I want to show you some of the atonement arguments that exist in the world. If you guys, I don't have my controller. Would you move it? These are some of the atonement arguments that you can find. One is Christus Victors. That at the end, it says that Jesus won. The penal substitution is the one that was carried heavily by Luther and Calvin and Luther, actually. The moral influence argument is the one that communicates how Jesus really shows an example of changing the morality of our civilization. And the last one, recapitulation, which is where Jesus restores our relationship with God. Now, none of them are wrong. None of them are right or perfect. These are just methods for us to understand what happens on the cross. But when you shake them all, what they're all trying to communicate is how you process this amazing thing, not that Christ did, but continues to do today. Resurrection isn't about something that happened long time ago. Resurrection is what happens right now and the new challenge that Christ is giving you today. Resurrection isn't about being guilt into loving Jesus. I have been in those worship services when they give you the cross or they give you the nail and they go overboard with the fake blood and they tell you, oh, you do not deserve the saving grace of Jesus. You are a sinful person and you are destined for hell and fire. However, you need to love Jesus because he took your place on the cross and died for you. And so you need to be guilt-tripped into loving someone. What kind of love is that? Instead, know that atrocious thing did happen and that Christ is giving us a new life. And the best evidence that I have of this case is that the end of the story does not end on his death, but in his resurrection. But the resurrection was not just it. Jesus spent, you know how many days, give or take, Jesus spent with the disciples after the resurrection? Who said it? Ding, 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 ding. That's right. Wait. The reality is not that 40 days. Is that Jesus spent a lot of time reminding the disciples of the same thing that he spent so many years saying it. It's a repetition of the repetition. It is Jesus acknowledging that he said it, that he was repeating it, and then sharing it again. So I ask, what is the best thing that my mother ever did for me? What is the best thing that my father ever did for me? And more importantly, what is the most significant thing that I can do for my children? Simply to remember that Jesus died, or to do something with the life that I have because Jesus gave me love, encouragement, and peace. So, my challenge for you today is that on this Risen Lord Sunday, you acknowledge that the best is not in the past, but is moving forward. Despite challenges, despite changes and transitions and painful things, that you give the glory to God every time that you decide to be stubborn because he was stubborn first. Giving us love. Now, this is where some of my friends will argue, but Jesus was abandoned on the cross because of the sin of the world. Father, why have you abandoned me? I want you to understand that what Jesus experienced wasn't truly abandonment on the cross. People of God, I want you to understand, my God, why have you forsaken me? Are not the words of someone that was experiencing abandonment, but someone that understood the power of this gospel before it was even written. My God, why have you forsaken me? Is not words of abandonment, but a quote from Psalm 22. Psalm 22 says those words. My God, why have you forsaken me? And if you continue reading all the verses of Psalm 22, you will understand that Jesus was communicating a deeper message of the gospel even from the cross. Even in the midst of suffering, Jesus was preaching encouragement for you and I. And this is where I ask you a question once again. What held Jesus to the cross? Some might say rope and nails. I will argue love. Love is the thing that held Jesus to the cross. Not the nails and the rope, but the love. Psalms are important, like any music that you might have. Sometimes a music goes directly into your heart, and sometimes you know exactly what follows. Here's my test. I want you to think about the land of the free because the land of the free because of the... You see, even in our national anthem, we are celebrating bravery amidst suffering. I want you to understand it doesn't say we are free because of the graves. No, it's not graves, it's braves. So you can go into the world and search the world, and you will see that the world will not fail you. You can show the worst, and in this life, Christ will give you the best looking forward. That it is through Christ, because of Christ, and with Christ, we can turn and see and understand that Christ has the power to turn graves into gardens. You can give Christ the worst and your challenges and your past, and Christ, with his power, will give you into a future, because that is the power of the resurrection, my friends. So be not afraid. Don't look backwards. Look forward to what Christ continues to do on this day. Thanks be to God. Amen.